Hi first graders, I am back with our next read aloud. I'm pretty excited because this one is called The Golden Pharaoh. Okay, so here we go. Many years after Hatshepsut ruled, another pharaoh would rule for 9 years and then be almost completely forgotten for 3,000 years. His name was Tutankhamun. I practiced that before. Tutankhamun. But today, that's kind of a long, so he has a nickname. He is called King Tut. King Tut was only 9 years when he became pharaoh, and he died when he was only 19. So, that's like a third grader becoming the president of the United States. Could you imagine? Pretty cool. So he was 9 years old when he was a pharaoh. We're not sure why he died at such a young age. And after his death, some thought he might have had some sort of accident. When he died, he wasn't buried in a pyramid like the pharaohs in Hatshepsut's time. Instead, pharaohs were buried in the hillsides of a valley. The valley was called the Valley of the Kings. None of the tombs of the pharaohs of the Valley of the King were marked. So tombs are places where people are buried after they die. So in an unmarked tomb in the valley, Pharaoh Tut would rest, surrounded by treasure and forgotten by the world for nearly 33 centuries, a very long time ago. So remember, we heard the word treasure. What does treasure mean again? Now we jump from a time that was super long ago until a time a little bit closer to today. 100 years ago, a British archaeologist named Howard Carter was interested in trying to find the lost tomb in the Valley of the Kings. An archaeologist is a scientist who studies the people of the past by looking at what they left behind, such as tools or pottery. Carter's partner was a British nobleman, Lord Carnarvon. Carnarvon was interested in finding the lost tombs in the Valley of the Kings. Over the next few years, working for and often accompanied by Lord Carnarvon, Carter found a number of ancient objects scattered throughout the valley. But he had a mind and a greater prize. Another archaeologist found objects that had hieroglyphics written on them mentioning Pharaoh Tut. However, Carter was determined to find the tomb. King Tut was convinced that somewhere in the valley lay his burial site. Could he find it? So remember, they don't know where the king is buried. So these scientists were trying to find it. It's kind of like buried treasure. Trying to find the location of the tomb is not easy. Robbers often show up to steal any valuable objects when they hear about there being new discoveries. Valuable means precious or worth a lot of money. In a book about his career, archaeologist Howard Carter wrote about one dangerous encounter with such thieves in the Valley of the Kings. A band of robbers had learned of a discovery, and on a moonlit night, the thieves crept through the shadows of the valley, determined to steal whatever they could carry away. But just as they were starting to gather the loot, a second band of robbers appeared with the same idea. Instantly, the two gangs attacked one another in a fierce battle in the moonlight and at the burial sites of ancient pharaohs. The second gang chased off the first, but Howard Carter heard the noise of their fight, and he calmly described what happened next. Oh my goodness! I collect a few of my workmen still nearby and set out for the scene of action, an expedition involving a climb of more than 1,800 feet over the hills in the moonlight. It was midnight when we arrived on scene, and the guide pointed out to me the end of a rope dangling down the face of the cliff. Listening, we could hear the robbers at work. I cut their rope, cutting their means of escape. Then, making a secure, good, stout rope of my own, I lowered myself down a cliff. There were 8 robbers at work when I lowered myself down. There was an awkward moment or two. Eventually, they saw the reason and departed. The rest of the night, I spent guarding the spot. For 6 years, Howard Carter searched for the tomb of the Pharaoh Tut. 2 men had focused their attention on one area in the Valley of the Kings and left in the ground beneath some huts where ancient workers had lived while digging the royal tombs. Carter decided to give this area one last try. He and his men removed the huts, leveling off the soil below. As Carter finished removing the first of the workers' huts, he found something exciting. For there, lost in the world of 32 centuries and almost overlooked by Carter and his partner, was a stone staircase leading to the rocky floor of the valley. Carter and his friends uncovered the steps one by one until they cleared the dirt from the top of the 12th step. They saw beyond it, in Carter's own words, the upper part of the doorway. Atop the doorway was a hieroglyphic seal that's showing that the door had been sealed shut under royal authority. Authority is the power to make and enforce rules. Whoever had been buried here was either royal or somehow very important to the pharaoh. Almost overcome with excitement, Carter cut a small hole in the door and shone a light through the hole. Inside, he saw a hallway filled to the top with rocks. It took all his self-control to not break through and begin flinging the rocks out. Instead, leading some of his men to guard the place, he covered the door up again and rode off in the moonlight, thinking anything might lie beyond that passage or hallway. But none of them were exactly sure where Carter had found. The exciting part is we get to hear the rest of the story tomorrow, okay? But first I have some questions. What do you think Carter found? What do you think Carter found? How old was King Tut when he became a pharaoh? All right, my next 2 questions, I think these would be a really good one to write down, okay? Do you think you could rule a country at age 9? Why or why not? Could you rule our country when you turn 9? And my last question for you to write down. Why do you think Howard Carter was interested in finding King Tut's tomb? Why do you think he was interested in finding King Tut's tomb? Alrighty, so you're gonna write down those two questions already. Shout out to Josiel for sending me his questions from yesterday. I loved seeing it. I got to send back a wow emoji. It was pretty fun. So if you want to send them to me, I would love to see what you think. If you could rule the country, I want to know. I bet some of you are gonna say yeah, and some of you might say no way. So you have to tell me why, okay? All right, so in today's read aloud, you heard this word. I'm going to use my purple color today. It's a pretty long word. Oh, goodness. You heard our word archaeologist. Can you say that with me? Archaeologist. It's a really, really long word. Archaeologist is a scientist who studies people of the past by looking at what they left behind. They often dig in the ground to find out what was left behind. Okay? So, an archaeologist recently found pottery in a Native American village. Alrighty. So again, our word is archaeologist. I want to know, have you heard that word before? Maybe you have. I'm excited to read about our archaeologist tomorrow. Remember, our word from yesterday was tradition. And I told you about a tradition that my family has with piercing ears and Easter eggs. Alrighty, I will see you tomorrow. Bye, bright stars.